Reaper was given a high ceiling for the purpose of a challenge, and unfortunately it was watered down to be too accessible and easily completable for the player base that it is now targeting. Now, let's think back to 2017. To the few of you that remember the old days of when Reaper was first introduced, when it launched around the start of February, it actually contained a decent challenge to an extent. Some groups were able to complete this difficulty without a breeze first day. Some of you may have known Cetus. He did break in the ice on R10, I want to say. I believe also Trial by Fire was completed on R10 that first day as well. And unfortunately, this slowly introduced something to the game that was called power creep. Before we go and talk about power creep, let's just talk about the good old days where even in Reaper 6, I myself was struggling. I know plenty of others were struggling. It was constantly Reaper 5, Reaper 6, maybe even Reaper 7. Sometimes we ran Reaper 7 Ravenloft with a decent tank. There was no, I could walk into R10 and complete it without spending 20-25 minutes on each quest. And unfortunately, they slowly increased the power creep between items and expansions that it just became an average everyday thing. Ravenloft was actually the first show of the peak of power, and then it was Sharn, and then it was Feywild, and then they did the power creep nerf. And we've now landed today where frequently completing R10s with absolutely no issue or hassle. I mean, look at my videos on my Cold Druid. People are still going to struggle, but veterans can just complete this difficulty without a problem. If you get a caster in your group, because of how casters are ridiculously strong, and especially the tier 5s and the epic destinies, you're going to have no problem completing a Reaper 10 quests when the intent of Reaper was to actually create a challenge. Unfortunately, there's not this challenge gap because of the things that have been introduced over time, especially with the change of epic destinies. The tier 5s and epic destinies are very powerful. There's not a single one that I think would underperform. Maybe Primal could use a little bit of tuning, but I think a lot of them all have their special abilities to them, and they have a really good, nice niche to the tree. Unfortunately, this also increased the power that certain classes can hold, such as Monks Split the Soul. Not to go into too many details, but that epic moment is pretty freaking nice for 30 seconds. Slowly introduced into update 42.4, we got new Reapers that started at 5 skulls, which were the Vengeance and the Despair, and at Skull 7, we had the magnificent Doom Reaper introduced. However, there are other changes within update U42.4 that a lot of people would recognize today, since this was introduced in 2019. People that are coming in and people that have came in from like August of 2020 and further wouldn't know this, but the mobs actually had their defenses lowered, but the defenses on Reapers increased. So monsters were actually much able to be killed faster, in a sense that quests, instead of taking 20 minutes, were taking 15 minutes because they reduced the defenses. And at that time, that was feasible. But now we have Epic Destinies, which are now very different from the old Epic Destinies and hold a lot more power, especially and as well as these expansions. There are certain items that are best in slot, like Red Dragon Armor, or the Acid effect, as well as LGS effects, such as Dust, Ooze, even Ash. All of these are the reasons that Reaper can be completed so quickly and so efficiently in today's era of DDO. It's been 3 years since the change was introduced, and we've actually seen a silent increase of Reaper mode nerfs and changes without making it into the patch notes. I'm not going to go into too many details about this, but if you're asking what the changes are, certain things like Fear Reapers had their damage increased. Dooms now hit for roughly 4 times their damage. I used to get hit for 600 to 700 on my Monk, and now I get hit for 27 to 2800 and I'm dead. And if I remember, Despair Aura also had a buff save, but I'm not sure about that value. I just know that Despairs are now much more struggling than they were before the silent buff. But besides that point, I'm going to admit it, Reaper's boring. I'm not afraid to say it, it's too easy. I post posted countless videos of a druid soloing R10s. Nukers are an extremely strong pace and need to be adjusted severely to balance questing in general. I could take many examples. For example, sorcerers in heroics, they can easily breeze through R3, R4, even R5 content without having a problem. I've done it many of times. My bear, for example, I wasn't streaming this, but my bear actually casually ran through a whole R3 life, even starting at level 4. Like, I was just blowing through it, even an Isle of Dread. If you're a veteran and you know these quests, Reaper is not intimidating whatsoever. I want it to be intimidating, and right now it's just like, oh boy, woo, watch whap through the dungeon. Like, it's not anything that's golden, but it's also not anything that's like boring, because I mean, I still run in. Reapers still kill me eventually from time to time, like force missiles when I forget to apply shield. But regardless, casters really need to be discussed, and that's for a separate video. But I've played from all perspectives: melees, ranged, and even the caster. If you have a decently built caster or nuker, you're going to be just fine. But I'd also like to take a moment to thank the developers for attempting to nerf things that needed to be nerfed very quickly, especially after a certain race came from existence. The shifter made druid very overpowered. It's been tuned down since then, but it's still an extremely easy style to play, and you can check out videos on this cold druid and what I used to quest with it. You will eventually see more nukers over time, such as on my server, Argoness, and I see cold sorcerers, fire sorcerers, and even cold druids. Both are extremely strong and can toss out heals within their epic destinies. You can pick up a nuker and it's go time. So what can be done about Reaper to provide a change that addresses maybe some of these issues? Well, I got a chance to interview some of the top veteran players. Needless to say, they had some very interesting suggestions, but the primary universal suggestion was actually to add a variety of Reapers. I think this is a good idea, and some of the Reaper designs that could be created from this idea are extremely strong. You could do something like a soul-bitten Reaper, like how the T-Rex and the Skeletons of the Closet eats the maximum hit points of a player, but also cater to casters so it's not just melees. You could do something like 5% HP and 10% spell points, or even reduce the amount of damage by -5%, and you could stack it up to 5 times. You could do a Corcasa-inspired Reaper. Anyone who isn't near this Reaper will take a lightning strike for X amount of damage. I would like to think that there's a huge variety of Reapers that could arrive to this game and actually provide challenge. However, there were more than just that universal response. A few others suggested removing Lost Souls completely, as there are other ways of receiving mana, such as a Ring of Spell Storing, which is a very overpowered item. This is unfairly balanced and gives casters yet another one-up against melee and ranged, as if they weren't already broken. I'd love to see all tier 3 champions receive Deathblock, and even tier 2 champions. And damage reduction based on alignment, based on the quest level times 10. So in this case, a quest that's level 36, that champion would receive 360 lawful, chaotic, good damage reduction. I would also like to see Reaper healing more forgivable, but in a way that it doesn't necessarily remove or trivialize the dedicated healers in this game. Another suggestion was create some more champions or cycle champions, like we see on hardcore difficulty. This was to spice up questing a bit, but this didn't directly affect Reaper because champions are also an elite, but more versatility would be nice. You could change champions every season. Season lasts about 3 months or even 6 months, and it would be a positive response. Mix the game up a bit, throw it on a loop. Deflect arrows could also use a nerf. Probably increases icons to 8 to 10, because ranged-based creatures need to be less forgiving, and for a fee of 6 action points in a Vistani Knife Fighter, which almost every playstyle at cap, regardless of melee or ranged, is going to take, can receive the Deflect Arrows fee. And personally, myself, I would love to see the revert back to the old defense numbers, as those were times that actually required tanks to hold aggro while players spent time beating monsters down. With this game being easy as it is, what the game has changed over the course of 5 years, maybe it's time for some reverts to actually take place and bring out some competition in the game. I just want to add one thing. Please nerf casters. They're ridiculously overpowered. Now, if you had a chance to suggest a change about the Reaper difficulty, what would you say? Please let me know. I love to read the comments and suggestions. Everything that people say, I always like to say, well, what could this look like in the game? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you don't mind, like, comment, and press the 9-letter button in the white that spells out SUBSCRIBE to help traction of this video reach around a more variety targeted audience. There's more videos available. Stay tuned, and I'll catch you later.